Welcome to The Law Matters. I'm Debbie Moraes, your host and moderator. This is your source for legal information and answers to frequently asked questions on a wide variety of issues. We continue to provide information and resources that might help you as you address various topics of concern in your daily newspaper and even in your daily life. The program offers a basic overview of many legal processes, but also the details, relevant cases, and sometimes some amusing anecdotes. We hope to help you understand and even at times prepare for what might await you in the legal system. As a public service program, Law Matters was created to help you protect yourself, your family, and your business, as we say. The information, resources, and FAQs are meant to assist you whether you need legal counsel or you actually decide that you might find that some of your issues are do-it-yourself projects. Either way, our goal is to continue to help you save time, save money, and achieve the best possible results. Attorney David Bazar, welcome.
Thank you.
With Bazar and Associates Law Firm in East Providence, continues to offer his experience, his perspectives, analysis, and insights in each session. We want, of course, to say thanks for continuing to do that. And as we begin today's topic, municipal courts. They address where you live, where you drive, where you build. So we're going to discuss what their purpose is and what you need to know if you receive a notice of such an infraction, whether it's a summons, a fine. They are likely to cost you time and money, just as we mentioned. So what recourse do you have? What do you need to know about the process? And today we're talking to David, who is, yes, a lawyer, but also serves as a municipal court judge. So sometimes he's in a suit, sometimes in a robe, maybe even with a powdered wig, but maybe not. So municipal court systems, city systems, what are they about? What's their purpose?
So it's a little bit different in every state, but in Rhode Island, we have a court system that's either federal, state, and in this case, municipal. And there are two types of courts that a city or town might have. There's municipal court and probate court. There are 39 cities and towns in Rhode Island, as we hear often, but every city and town has a probate court, but only, I shouldn't say only,
or so?
In the mid-20s or so, most cities and towns have municipal court, but not every.
Mm-hmm. What is their purpose?
Okay.
I said drive, build, yep. Whatever. So
municipal courts have jurisdiction, and depends on which city or town because they're created by statute, but most are the same. Providence has the oldest municipal court, I believe, and their jurisdiction is a little different than some of the other cities and towns because they also have a housing court as separate and apart.
Providence does?
Yeah, from their municipal court. But in most of the other municipal courts, you have both the jurisdiction that the Providence Municipal Court would have as well as the jurisdiction that the housing court would have. So what are those jurisdictions? So the municipal court jurisdiction generally is traffic offenses, and now we have some concurrent jurisdiction with the Rhode Island Traffic Tribunal for many offenses. And the statute says that if there is a municipal court in a city or town, the police department shall write the tickets for the concurrent jurisdiction to the municipal court. If there's exclusive jurisdiction in the traffic tribunal for certain things, it has to go to the traffic tribunal. For tickets to minors, children driving, I guess, between the ages of 16 and 18, that's exclusive jurisdiction to the traffic tribunal, even if it's a type of ticket that municipal court might have. And
good to know.
Yeah, and so that's the, I'll give you, for example, driving without insurance, generally speaking, goes to the traffic tribunal. Speeding up to 10 miles an hour over, if there's jurisdiction in the municipal court, goes to the municipal court.
So how many are on the bench, so to speak, in a municipal court? Do you have a cadre of 5 or 6, or just generally one? How does that work?
Again, it'll depend on the city or town.
Providence is big?
Providence has at least 3, if not 4, on the municipal court, and then 3 or so in their housing court. So, and they meet daily. East Greenwich has a chief judge, and that's me. We have an associate judge, that's me. We have one judge, and in municipal court. And so I meet when my traffic jurisdiction gets returned, hopefully soon, another story, twice a month.
Twice a month.
Yep.
So what's the process? Someone ends up receiving a little police ticket from the side of the road. You're over 20, I'll write it as 10, you'll go to the municipal court, or maybe you won't. Maybe you'll just mail in that fine. How does that process go? Does that vary from town to town? And if you have to appear before you or someone like you, what recourse do you have? Appeal? How does that work?
Yeah. So let's start with moving violations, traffic tickets, speeding. And because we're only touching the tip of the iceberg on all of the jurisdiction.
Sure.
Let's start with the traffic ticket. So you get a ticket and you have a good driving record and never had to pay a ticket before, or at least within the 5 years prior to or whatever the ticket you just got. You can go to court and you can use your good driving record, and you can have the case dismissed on your good driving record.
Would you have to ask for that, or would the judge say, I see nothing?
No, before court starts, most courts, we give all the rights to the people who are in front of us. And the first appearance is sort of similar to an arraignment in district court or superior court, when you go in and you get charged with the offense for the first time. So as you sit there, you have certain rights. You're presumed innocent. You don't have to prove anything. The town bears the burden of proof of proving the case against you, and all of those rights. So all of your rights are explained to you before court starts generally. And one of the things that will be explained is that if you have a good driving record, and as I'm sitting there, your record is in front of me. The abstract is pulled for us before court, so we can take a look at it and say, yeah, you have a good driving record. So if someone comes up in front of me when they check in, my clerk has already told them, you can use your good driving record, sign an affidavit that you haven't had a moving violation anywhere else, and that you haven't used it, I think it's 3 years, within the 3 years prior, then the case will get dismissed on costs. And it goes up all the time, but I think we're up to like 63 or 65 and change, because there's a technology fee and some other fees that get mixed into that thing.
If someone had a good driving record, David, and receives a ticket, couldn't they just mail it in and save themselves a trip? What would trigger their necessity of them appearing before you? Or
if you have a good driving record?
Yes, you get the 10
Your option
hours.
is to mail in the ticket.
Yes, or?
And pay it in full.
That's
and
billed.
have it on your record.
Yes.
Or to come in, and if you are going to use your good driving record to admit the violation, but to use your good driving record and have the court dismiss it. But the court has to dismiss the ticket. You can't mail it in and say, I know the ticket's $100, here's $65, dismiss my ticket, please.
Yes.
You have to go there, and the judge has the right to look at it and determine. And it's pretty much a shall versus a may. Shall dismiss it on the good driving record, but the court has to look at it and determine that, yes, you do in fact have the good driving record.
Okay, if the policeman pulled you over and didn't have the gun, appears before you or some other judge, and you say, pay the fine. Do we have any recourse to appeal it? Suppose we said, sorry, that was arbitrary and capricious, a great line.
Yeah.
Do you have an appeal process for that, or are you stuck?
We haven't done the trial yet.
Oh, okay.
So before we appeal, let's have the trial.
Okay.
So you said didn't have the gun?
Didn't have the gun.
The radar gun.
No, he just flagged you over.
Flagged you over because he either was behind you and clocked your speed or estimated your speed. The ones with the radar trials, they're pretty hard to beat unless you get a police officer who doesn't testify to the calibration, the training, and the use, and all of that type of thing.
Information for our viewers to tune into.
Sure. The estimated speeds or the clocking, that's when they drive behind you and check their speedometer versus what you're doing. Those are tougher cases for police officers sometimes to prove, and there's bigger holes you can punch in those. Again, Was the speedometer calibrated? And when's the last time it was calibrated? And how was it calibrated? Sometimes they actually do calibrate them by driving them, checking the speed in the car, and measuring it with a radar gun that's been calibrated to make sure. And if they can testify that they did all that, maybe they have a case.
Okay.
But you have your trial, and you are not satisfied with the result of the trial in front of the municipal court judge or the sentence imposed by the municipal court judge, you have a right to appeal to the traffic tribunal. There is a appeals board at the traffic tribunal that will hear your case.
And then if you lose, you have yet another set of court fees to deal with, or even if you win, you might have another set of court fees, correct?
There are fees for appealing.
For appealing.
So you will pay fees to appeal, and you have to provide the transcript, the recording, because we record all of our trials, and there's a fee probably to get that transcript. I'm not involved with that, so I'm not 100% sure, but there's a transcript that has, or a recording that has to be sent along with your appeal. And if you send it along and the recording isn't intelligible, that's a grounds for the appellate division to dismiss the case.
Good to know. News you can use. You mentioned Providence earlier. I understand that Providence also in its municipal court system has a way, or they're the source of providing overnight parking permits, or I guess adjudicating them if there are issues. But between the colleges that reside in the Providence jurisdiction, there are many kids who need to have permits, and I guess they're having issues with it both ways, but that's yet another thing that I guess the municipal court in the city of Providence at least deals with.
Well, here's in East Greenwich, and many cities
East Greenwich
and towns.
too?
Sure. There's an ordinance in East Greenwich that there's no overnight parking anywhere in East Greenwich. Now, there are some spots where a resident can get from the police department, I believe it is, or the clerk's office, but I think it's the police department, a pass, a sticker that allows them to park in certain designated areas on the street where they live, where there's no other parking available. But you have to have the residential sticker to do that. So many times people will come in front of me with the overnight parking ticket, and they'll say, I didn't know you couldn't park overnight on the street in East Greenwich. And so I often jokingly say, well, haven't you ever seen the sign that says, welcome to East Greenwich, and then in the fine print underneath it, no overnight parking anywhere in the town? I didn't see that. So I will oftentimes say, this is your first free bite at the apple. We'll dismiss the first one, but I never forget a face, so you have the opportunity to have this one dismissed, but if you come back, you now know that you can't. And if you live in one of those areas, I tell them to go and get the residential parking stickers so that they're allowed to do that.
Where would one do that? Would they get that at a municipal court too? Or do they...
Not the municipal court, not in East Greenwich at least. It's, like I said, I think it's the police department, but it very well may be the town clerk's office.
Certainly worthy of checking out. So in places such as even Johnston, Rhode Island, they have a municipal court now with local ordinance since 1964. When other cities and municipalities didn't have a municipal court, how did the zoning and the driving issues, how were those things adjudicated? Did they go to some other court? And which ones? How did that work?
So here's the problem.
Confusing.
The traffic tribunals issues, the speeding and that type of thing, would go to the traffic tribunal. Zoning issues, housing issues, ordinance violations, there's really no place that either can hear that or wants to hear that. Some of the jurisdiction may be in district court, but the district court doesn't want to sit there and listen to whether or not this person cut their grass or violated something else, which is why most cities and towns have municipal courts, to get the revenue from the traffic and to be able to enforce the other ordinances. Some things can be overlapped, like you could get an ordinance violation of public disorderly conduct or public drunkenness, and some of those things could be written as a district court criminal violation, but now you're forcing a police officer to file a type of thing that's a little bit more serious than maybe he really thinks it's worth. So does he then say, forget it, I'm just not even going to write the ticket? So the municipal courts serve a very important purpose in enforcing ordinances, housing issues, zoning issues, those types of things.
Good to know. Is there a difference between a city court and a municipal court? I know you said things vary state to state, but are they pretty much synonymous?
Synonymous.
Low-level crimes, most have fees attached to them. Do municipal courts throw people in jail?
So now
I know there's a limit on it, but...
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting thing because
Okay.
there's some issue that's been raised, and rightfully so, that if somebody is facing jail time for something, even in a municipal court, they have a right to an attorney. So the city of Providence, for example, has, if you can't afford an attorney, the ability to appoint an attorney for you. In my court, I would appoint an attorney if a case came before me where someone had the potential.
What has the potential, David?
Well, the ordinance that creates the courts and the ordinances that we're enforcing sometimes have, up to 30 days in jail for some violations. There can also be a contempt violation where someone could be put in jail. And now there's a question as to whether or not that requires an appointment of an attorney. Certainly the underlying case that created the order that's supposed to be enforced doesn't require an appointment of an attorney. But if you're going to have a contempt violation where someone might face jail, I would argue that we either tell them to get an attorney or offer to appoint an attorney for them.
So they'd appear, and then you'd say, this looks like it could be a potential issue. Let's reschedule this once someone's been represented or whatever.
The first time they appear.
That's when they're going to hear that.
If there's a potential 30-day jails, or if it's contempt, it could be even longer. You would say, this is a case that you're being charged with that has the potential for you being held in jail. And you have a right to an attorney. So if you can't afford one, I can appoint one for you. Do you want me to appoint an attorney for you, or do you want to hire your own attorney or waive the right to an attorney?
I understand when I was checking this out across other states that there's a cap of something like 6 months for possible jail time that you could levy as a as a sentence. After that, it would have to go to another court. Is that true in Rhode Island? Do you have any sense of 6 months, the cap?
I think 6 months might even be beyond what it is. I think it's 30 days.
Okay. And then what might happen if you saw that whatever this person had done, or the number of times he's done, whatever, is likely to be beyond, or deserving of being beyond 30 days? Would you boot it to a different court? How would that work?
Well, if it's something like that, the police department that charged it in East Grange Police Department would have probably charged them with another crime already that has that potential. And I usually work with the prosecutor who's prosecuting the case in district court as well. I'm not going to double dip and do that type of thing. So if the case is handled in district court, then eventually I might just dismiss the municipal court violation. Or if they're going to dismiss that one, then I'd enforce, I'd have a hearing on the violation brought in front of me.
Interesting process. So we've talked about speeding and driving offenses, but closer to home, there was an example of a woman who had somewhere been between burying her mother and taking care of a sick father in, I think it was Maryland. This woman had to renew her licenses for her 2 dogs. And that's a home kind of offense. So instead of paying $17 per dog for the license, she was ending up spending a day in court having to pay $122 in fines and fees, and then I guess they said the judge suspended one of the fines in exchange for a guilty plea. That sounds like it's pretty excessive, but it led to a bigger issue, and one that you've sort of alluded to, which is that municipal courts look like local cities and towns ATM machines or cash machines. I guess they're there to create revenue, as are those speeding tickets, but that was an editorial comment. But honestly, something like a dog fee renewal that should be $17 ends up being ratcheted up to $122 a day out of work, et cetera.
Yeah,
how does that go?
It's not an ATM or a revenue-producing thing. It's an enforcement thing.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was Judge Caprio or somebody else who one time said, I'm not a revenue officer, I'm a judge. And so sometimes people don't want to follow the rules. And the court is there for them to be brought to determine whether or not they followed the rules or didn't follow the rules. I had 2 dogs. I registered my dogs. There's a reason why there's an ordinance that requires us to register
Certainly.
our dogs, license them.
Certainly.
And so if somebody doesn't do that, we used to have, we haven't had this in a while, but the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, a Wednesday morning session where the animal control officer in East Greenwich would bring in the people who haven't complied with the rules for the year. And we'd have all those hearings on that day. I'd always pardon one turkey, but it's not the White House, so I don't really have any turkeys. But in any event, the real answer is follow the rules. And so all I'm trying to do with those cases is to tell people, I'm going to fine you, but if you register, license your dog, I'll suspend the fine. So there is no fee. I'm just trying to have compliance. And if they don't do it
Valuable
within the
point.
time, then there will be a fee or a fine, actually, that they'll have to pay in addition to the fee.
So you're fair and you're thoughtful. We'll give you kudos for that. It sounds like that's right. If you don't agree with the idea that you're just there to extract cash from offenders, but you're there to have compliance and have people toe the line. For an example, where someone had a sick mother, buried the father, or vice versa, or whatever, she had some extenuating circumstances. It seems to me that some allowance should be made, but lady, pay your two $17 license fees and
That's
leave.
exactly what we're trying to do. And so I forgot, I didn't remember. That's fine. Go do it. I'll continue the case. Come back, show me it's done, I'll dismiss it.
Sounds right.
And that's what we're trying to do with those types of cases. I have other cases where there could be a fine. Fellow who used to come to my court on a couple of occasions charged with public drunkenness or open container violations, and he had, in my opinion, a pretty serious drinking problem. I could have fined him, I think, up to $500 every time, but I didn't want to do that to him. What I wanted to do was to have him go get help for himself.
A very good example.
So I said to him, I'm going to set a fine, but I'm going to suspend the fine if you go to a counseling place and have an alcohol assessment done and bring that back to me and see whether or not counseling would help you. And so he did that, and he needed counseling. And again, I said, okay, get the counseling, and I'll dismiss the ticket at the end of the time. And so he got counseling, and hopefully, I haven't seen him since, he's been helped by that.
So let's hopefully say that you are not the exception to the situation, but do you have latitude? Do other judges completely have that kind of latitude that if they see what might be perhaps a more appropriate, actually even beneficial way of having the person make restitution, however you want to call that, do most judges have the opportunity to have that leeway and do as they wish?
I think we do. I think maybe you can be creative. We formed a little program in East Greenwich. There used to be one that was available statewide. They closed up. But I did a program in East Greenwich for young drivers who came in front of me, and it's 3 years for the good driving statute because they hadn't been driving 3 years, so they couldn't use it. But I didn't want just to give them a fine, have them pay the ticket, have their parents' insurance go up. So I created a program for helping them make good decisions. And what it was a program where they would meet with the, I call him the drug czar of East Greenwich, but Hodeling, who would meet with them, and Bob Hodeling, and just go through with them on, decision making. They were, have them do community service. And then Bob would write a report back to me. They'd come back to me and they would report back to me what they did for community service and what they learned from their meeting with Bob, and then we would dismiss the ticket.
That sounds very reasonable. Do other cities that you might know of that have some community service program that at least sets the young people, or maybe not just young people, sets people on the right course, and it's not, if you understand that they really don't have money, but they certainly could serve some time, and I don't mean in jail, but rather helping others or learning something. Does that exist in most other cities?
The traffic tribunal has the ability and has done that. I think other cities and towns have done that. Our program was a little more formal because there was a process to it, that rather than just sending someone out to do community service. But the whole idea was to give the youngster an opportunity to have it be a learning experience.
Yes.
And something that, isn't just a slap on the wrist and, I haven't learned anything, I'll just go out and speed again. There was a program that this was adopted from that we did, was called the RIDE program, which stood for Reducing Youthful Dangerous Decisions. And they would go to, I think it was Rhode Island Hospital, and maybe see a day or actually a night in the emergency room.
Yes.
And meet with some folks who would explain about how you make a decision, even if it's speeding, how that can be dangerous. Going through a red light, what's the danger of that? And I think they had them put on the glasses that sort of mimic alcohol use and how you can see and feel and things like that, and write a little essay on what they learned from it. That program, the funding went away, so when that went away is when we created our own program.
Good to know. So we always say that we try to provide information, as we did in this session, about so that people can decide if they want to represent themselves. Municipal court, we're not talking about something that's higher level criminal offenses. Do you find that most people come in and just without a representation of a lawyer? And for the ones who do, is it usually the drunk driving cases that you have a lawyer?
Well, we don't have jurisdiction for DUI cases.
Right, that goes to the tribunal.
Right. But there are certain cases where you should come in with an attorney, especially if you have a case where you think there's a defense and you want to be able to present that effectively, and you're facing something more than just a fine. For example, if you come in as a violator of the Collin Foot Law, which in Rhode Island is if you've had more than 3 violations or 3 or more violations in an 18-month period, you can lose your license for a period of time. Our driver's retraining, very expensive, and other fees and community service that you're going to be paying. If you have a defense, you might want to come in with an attorney for something like that because there are serious consequences.
How does that strike you if someone comes before you, say it's a zoning issue rather than it necessarily being a driving issue? Do you need to, I'm sure you have to spend more time with the case because there's someone there who's going to give you case in point and do the litany of defense items to review. Does that weigh heavily on your judgment because they've built a case rather than the average person who comes in and says, Mr. Bazar, dear Mr. Bazar, dear Judge, I shouldn't have, I know I shouldn't have, but in other words, nothing that's factual, no facts to say that this is why I should not be paying. How does that weigh on you from your side when you're wearing the robe rather than the suit?
So it's interesting. In municipal court, probably 90% or more of our cases are pro se folks.
Sure.
Some have come in with very impressive arguments. I had one guy come in trying to challenge the law itself on speeding limits and prima facie speeding limits and how they're set and how the town or city can't set it. It's by a commission and a board. And his research was actually very intriguing. But then again, you have the people come in and they just want to tell a story. And frankly, for me, I like to hear the stories. I like to hear people's stories. Parking tickets. I was going to my son's graduation at the high school and I was late and I parked in the handicap spot and I'm really sorry, but I had to get in there right away. There was a reason for it. Or I had an emergency. I was picking up or dropping off something. So every story counts.
Good to know. We hope that this has been helpful to you. We hope, of course, that you don't need to be in front of judges in municipal and city courts. Stay tuned to The Law Matters. We'll continue to give you information that law matters to you.